2020 was the year that everything changed. Whether it be for the better or worse. From the Australian bushfires to the Black Lives Matter movement 2020, as well as aliens being confirmed by the government, 2020 was full of surprises. Along with all of these events came the COVID-19 virus, which devastated the world and brought the earth to a screeching halt. As with all viruses, a solution needed to be found. In this case, it was the vaccine. Even though the vaccine brought a promise to wipe out COVID, many were concerned. This was the fastest ever developed. There are myths flying around about how it gives you autism, and that it has a microchip installed, both of which are wrong, by the way. However, I do understand the concerns behind the vaccine, considering that the fastest before this, the mumps vaccine, took 4 years to develop. In order to answer to these concerns, here are a couple of things to consider. Firstly, scientists did not start from scratch when studying about SARS-CoV-2, the virus that caused COVID-19. This is a virus that belongs to a family of hundreds of similar ones, under the family name SARS, or Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. This means that there has been extensive research done on these types of viruses, including data on the structure, genome, and life cycle of this type of virus. In fact, 4 of the viruses that cause the common cold belong to this family of viruses. Secondly, there has been a huge amount of funding that was put into the development of from both public and private cash, putting aside the financial concerns pharmaceutical companies usually face. What's more is that demand and urgency for the vaccine are very high. Lastly, it is important to consider the fact that due to this pandemic having a global reach, there were many more willing volunteers for vaccine studies. The development includes rigorous testing guidelines with different phases keeping up to standard the vaccine patient's safety, as well as measuring its efficacy in preventing the disease. A pathogen is any disease-causing bacterium, virus, parasite, or fungus. It is usually made up of many different subparts that are unique to that specific pathogen. The subpart that initiates the production of antibodies is the antigen. Vaccines work in the way that it uses weakened or inactive parts of a particular organism, the antigen, to trigger an immune response in the body. This weakened version will not cause a disease in the person receiving the vaccine, but will prompt their immune system to respond in the same way that it would respond to the actual pathogen. Sometimes vaccines require multiple doses, given weeks or months apart, in order for the body to produce memory cells. These are cells that store the specific antigen, so that if the pathogen were ever to attack the body again, it would result in the quick production of antibodies, which are proteins that bind to the antigens and wipe out the threat before you even realize it. As previously mentioned, COVID-19 is caused by SARS-CoV-2. It is a virus, and because of this, antibiotics cannot be used. You cannot use normal antibiotics for viruses in general. This is because viruses are fundamentally different from bacteria in the way that they survive and in their structure. They are also surrounded by a protective protein coat. They move into and live inside and make copies of themselves in your body's cells, unlike bacteria, which attack the body's cells from the outside. Viruses don't have the ability to reproduce on their own like bacteria do. Instead, they attach themselves onto healthy cells and reprogram those cells to make new copies of themselves. There are 3 types of vaccines. The first being RNA vaccines. These vaccines work in that when they're introduced into a tissue, acts as messenger RNA to cause the cells to build the foreign protein and stimulate an adaptive immune response which teaches the body how to identify and destroy the corresponding pathogen or cancer cells. Commercial vaccines of this type include Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna vaccines. The second is adenovirus vector vaccines, which uses an adenovirus shell containing DNA that encodes a SARS-CoV-2 protein. The viral vector-based vaccines against COVID-19 are non-replicating, meaning they cannot make new virus particles, but rather produce only the antigen, which elicits a systemic immune response. An authorized vaccine of this type is the Oxford, AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. The third are inactivated virus vaccines. These consist of virus particles that have been grown in culture and then are killed using a method such as heat or formaldehyde to lose disease-producing capacity, which again stimulates the immune response. Authorized vaccines of this type include the Chinese CoronaVac and the Indian Covaxin. Lastly, there are subunit vaccines, which present one or more antigens without introducing whole pathogen particles. The antigens involved are often protein subunits, but can be any molecule that is a fragment of the pathogen. Authorized vaccines of this type include the peptide vaccine APVac Corona and ZF 2001. For vaccines to be approved, they follow a three-phase process. During Phase 1, small groups of people receive the trial vaccine. In Phase 2, the clinical study is expanded and the vaccine is given to people who have characteristics, maybe age or physical health, similar to those for whom the new vaccine is intended. In Phase 3, the vaccine is given to thousands of people and tested for efficacy and safety. In the end, the vaccine is nothing to be afraid of, so get it. Not only will it bring society one step closer to normalcy, it will also put the risk group of the virus out of harm.